I hadn't expected the call. It was a quiet Thursday night, the kind that makes you feel too comfortable in your skin. I was 3 beers into a lazy evening when my buddy, let's call him Mike, phoned me, his voice hoarse and trembling. He asked me to come over. I asked why. He just said, "You'll see." Something in his tone told me not to question it. Mike was a cop, and he wasn't the kind to spook easy. Whatever had him this shaken, it wasn't your average bad day at work. When I got there, the lights in his house were all on, but the blinds were drawn tight. He opened the door before I knocked. His eyes looked hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. "Man, you need to see this," he muttered, pulling me inside. I followed him to the living room, where his laptop sat on the coffee table. The screen glowed faintly, paused on a grainy black and white video. "This is body cam footage," Mike said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're not supposed to take this home, but I had to." Before I could ask, he hit play. The footage started in an abandoned warehouse. The officer wearing the camera, Mike's partner, I later learned, was sweeping the area with his flashlight. The radio chatter was tense. Someone had reported screams coming from the building. It was eerily silent at first, just the crunch of boots on broken glass. Then a sound, a faint scratching, like nails dragging against concrete. The officer paused, shining his light toward the far corner of the room. That's when the figure appeared. At first it was just a shadow, hunched over, impossibly still. But as the flashlight beam landed on it, the figure jerked violently and stood. It was a man, or at least it had been. His skin was stretched tight over his bones, and his eyes reflected the light like a predator's in the dark. The officer shouted, "Police! Let me see your hands!" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head at an unnatural angle, its neck cracking audibly in the quiet space. Then it moved. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The thing moved faster than any human should be able to, darting between columns, its movements jerky and wrong. The officer's breathing grew ragged as he tried to keep his flashlight on it. "Backup! I need backup!" he yelled into his radio. Suddenly, the figure was gone. The camera panned frantically as the officer spun around, trying to locate it. Then, out of nowhere, the thing appeared behind him. The footage erupted in chaos, a blur of motion, the sound of the officer's terrified screams, and a guttural growl that didn't sound remotely human. The screen went black. The timestamp on the footage stopped abruptly. Mike paused the video and looked at me, his hands trembling. "They found his body 2 days later," he said. "What was left of it?" I sat back, trying to process what I'd just seen. "What the hell was that?" I asked. Mike shook his head. "I don't know. But that's not the worst part." He played another clip, this one from a traffic camera. It showed the same warehouse, its exterior bathed in the harsh orange glow of streetlights. At first it was still, the only movement coming from the occasional moth fluttering near the lights. Then the figure appeared. It walked out of the warehouse and into the middle of the street, its head still cocked at that impossible angle. It stopped and turned to face the camera, staring directly into the lens. My blood ran cold as I realized it wasn't just looking, it was smiling. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. "What did the department say about this?" I asked. "They're calling it a camera glitch," Mike said bitterly. "Told me not to dig any deeper." "But you did." "Of course I did." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That thing, it's been spotted before." He showed me a map he'd been working on, pinpoints scattered across the city. Each one marked a location where similar incidents had been reported. People disappearing, strange noises, mutilated bodies found days later. "Whatever this is," Mike said, "it's hunting." The last clip Mike showed me was the final straw. It was from his own body cam, recorded during a routine patrol the previous week. He and his partner had been responding to a 911 call about a man loitering outside a gas station. The footage showed them pulling up to the scene. At first, everything seemed normal. The man was standing under the flickering light of the gas station sign, his back to the camera. Mike approached, calling out to him. The man didn't move. "Sir, turn around," Mike ordered. Slowly, the man turned. It was the figure from the warehouse. Before Mike could react, the screen erupted in static. When the footage resumed, the figure was gone. But something new had appeared on the wall of the gas station, written in what looked like blood. "I see you." I left Mike's house that night with a knot in my stomach that still hasn't gone away. I don't know what I saw, and I don't know what's out there. But I do know one thing. I'm never answering another late-night call. A week passed after that night at Mike's house, and I tried to convince myself it was just a bad dream, a hallucination brought on by beer and a creepy story. But deep down, I knew better. Mike stopped responding to my texts and calls. That wasn't like him. I drove by his house, but the curtains were drawn, and his patrol car wasn't in the driveway. I told myself he was probably on a double shift, drowning in work. Then I got the call. It was a detective from the department. He said Mike hadn't shown up to work in 3 days, and they were trying to figure out if anyone had seen him. My stomach turned. I didn't know what to say. Do I tell him about the footage, the map, that Mike had been digging into something far bigger and darker than anyone wanted to admit? I mumbled something about how I hadn't heard from him, and the detective thanked me before hanging up. I sat there in silence, staring at my phone. That's when it rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" At first, there was just static. Then faintly, a voice I recognized. "It's me. Mike." Relief flooded through me. "Mike, where the hell are you? The department's looking for you." "Listen to me," he interrupted, his voice strained and distant. "You were right to leave that night. But it's not over." "What's not over?" "Mike, what's going on?" "They're everywhere," he whispered. "I thought it was just one, but it's not. They're watching, listening." His voice broke into static again, and I thought I lost him. But then he came back, louder, more desperate. "Don't trust anyone, not even the cops." The line went dead. I tried to call him back, but the number was disconnected. Panic clawed at my chest. If Mike was in trouble, what could I do? Who could I even turn to, especially if he didn't trust his own department? I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. His house. When I arrived, the place was eerily quiet. I used the spare key he'd given me years ago to let myself in. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of unwashed dishes and something metallic, like pennies left in water too long. The laptop was still on the coffee table, the screen dark. I hesitated before touching it, half expecting to see more of that horrifying footage. But when I opened it, there was nothing. No videos, no map, just a single file on the desktop titled, "If you're reading this." I clicked it. A document opened, filled with frantic, barely legible text. Mike's final message. "They're not human. They look like us, but they're not. The footage proves it. Every time someone disappears, they come back wrong. Perfect on the outside, but hollow on the inside. The higher-ups know, but they're covering it up. I dug too deep, and now they're coming for me. If you're reading this, you're next. Get out of the city. Don't let them take you. Burn this house. Destroy this laptop. Don't trust anyone, not even me." The room felt colder as I read his words. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the room, but it was empty. Or so I thought. A faint sound came from the kitchen, a slow, deliberate tapping, like fingers drumming against wood. My heart pounded as I crept toward the noise, each step heavier than the last. When I rounded the corner, I froze. Mike was sitting at the table, but it wasn't him. His head was tilted at that unnatural angle, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His lips curled into a smile, too wide, too sharp. "You should have listened," he said, his voice a distorted echo of the friend I once knew. I don't remember how I got out of the house. The next thing I knew, I was speeding down the highway, the city lights fading in my rearview mirror. I didn't stop until the sun rose, casting a pale, indifferent light over the empty road ahead. Mike was right. They're everywhere, watching, waiting. And now, they know I know. So if you're reading this, consider it a warning. If someone you know comes back different, too perfect, too calm, run. Because once they've seen you, they'll never stop hunting. And when they find you, you won't be you anymore. It was 11:58 p.m. when the call came through. I was slumped on my couch, half asleep, a rerun of some crime drama droning in the background. My police radio, usually silent this late, crackled to life, its static filling the quiet of my apartment. Unit 319. Disturbance reported at Oakwood Apartments. Building C-caller reports screaming from the third floor. Oakwood was a building that carried whispers in our precinct. It was one of those places where you'd expect to find peeling wallpaper and questionable tenants. But what made it infamous was the inexplicable. Officers would refuse assignments there unless they had no choice. Lights turned on in empty rooms. Footsteps echoed when no one was home. I rubbed the exhaustion from my eyes. 319 responding, I said into the radio. The drive over was uneventful, the city silent in that eerie pre-dawn way. By the time I pulled up to Oakwood, the place was exactly as I imagined. Weathered bricks, a flickering neon sign that buzzed faintly in the night air, and a silence so deep it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way in, the lobby dimly lit by a single bulb that swung overhead. The air smelled like mildew and something faintly metallic. A chill ran down my spine as I climbed the stairs to the third floor, the creak of the steps echoing like gunshots. Apartment 309. The door was ajar, swaying slightly as if it had just been opened. "Police," I called out, my voice steady but cautious. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Coppery. Unmistakable. Blood. The living room was in disarray. Furniture overturned, a lamp shattered. But the real horror was in the kitchen. A woman was crouched over a body, her back to me, her hair hung in wild, tangled strands. She wasn't just crouched. She was gnawing. "Ma'am," I said, trying to suppress the tremor in my voice, "I need you to step away." She froze, her head tilting unnaturally to the side like a bird sensing danger. And then she turned. Her eyes were black, not the pupils, all of them. She hissed, revealing jagged teeth, far too many for any human mouth. I didn't wait. My hand instinctively went to my sidearm as I barked, "Get on the ground!" She moved faster than I could process, darting toward the hallway. I followed, flashlight beam bouncing off the narrow walls. She disappeared into the shadows at the far end, and as I rounded the corner, the hallway seemed impossibly long, like it stretched into some void that didn't belong in the real world. A low guttural growl emanated from the darkness. My heart hammered in my chest. Then, the sound of footsteps. No, something crawling. It was coming toward me. I raised my gun. "Stop, or I'll shoot." The beam of my flashlight caught her face for a split second. It wasn't human anymore. The skin stretched too tightly over her skull, and her mouth opened impossibly wide, unhinging like a snake's. I fired. The gunshot echoed, deafening in the confined space. But when the smoke cleared, the hallway was empty. No body, no blood. Just the oppressive, suffocating quiet of Oakwood. I backed away slowly, my flashlight darting over every corner, every shadow. My radio crackled again. 319 status. I fumbled to answer. Disturbance resolved. No suspects on site. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. I got out of there fast, my pulse refusing to slow even after I was back in the squad car. The next morning I filed my report. But when I checked the call logs, there was nothing. No report of a disturbance. No record of a call to Oakwood. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, a hallucination maybe. But last night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a faint scratching at my bedroom window. I live on the 4th floor. The scratching didn't stop. It started as a faint, intermittent noise, like tree branches brushing against glass. But as the minutes dragged on, it grew more deliberate, rhythmic, insistent. My heart thudded as I reached for my gun on the nightstand. With every nerve screaming, I moved to the window. The curtains swayed faintly, as if coaxed by some unseen breath. I yanked them aside, gun raised, expecting, I don't know what. Nothing. The city lights twinkled as they always did, indifferent to the chaos roiling inside me. I exhaled, relieved, but the sound of something metallic clattering in my kitchen turned my blood to ice. I crept toward the sound, every creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet betraying my approach. The kitchen light was on, though I knew I'd turned it off before bed. The refrigerator door stood ajar, casting a pale glow that illuminated the room. And there she was, the woman from Oakwood. She was crouched on my counter, her black eyes fixed on me, her head tilted at that same unnatural angle. Her mouth opened, and a voice came out, but it wasn't hers. "Help me." It sounded like a man, deep and guttural, layered with static, like a distorted recording. "Stay where you are," I shouted, gun trembling in my hand. She didn't move. "Help me," the voice repeated. But now it was layered with others, a chorus of voices, male and female, old and young. They overlapped, rising and falling, like some grotesque symphony. I fired. The bullet struck her shoulder, but there was no blood, no reaction. She simply dropped from the counter, landing on all fours with an inhuman grace. The light flickered. Then she charged. I barely had time to move as she lunged, her jagged teeth snapping inches from my face. I hit the ground hard, scrambling backward as she loomed over me, her limbs bending at impossible angles. Her face was inches from mine now, and I could smell the rot emanating from her. "You saw us," she whispered, the words slithering into my ears like a hiss. I squeezed the trigger again and again, the gunshots deafening in the small space. Her body convulsed, the force of the bullets throwing her backward. And then, silence. I lay there for what felt like hours, the gun still clutched in my trembling hands. When I finally dared to move, I turned on every light in the apartment. The woman was gone, but the scratches she'd left on my kitchen tiles were real. So were the spent shell casings littering the floor. The next day, I didn't go to work. I needed answers. I drove back to Oakwood. It was daylight now, the building less menacing under the sun's glare. I knocked on the door of 309, unsure of what I expected to find. An old woman answered, her face lined with age and suspicion. "Who are you looking for?" she asked. "Do you live alone here?" I asked. She nodded. For years now. Why? The room was pristine. No sign of the chaos I'd seen the night before. I apologized and left. But as I walked away, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A figure stood in the third-floor window, watching me. Her tangled hair fell over her face, but I knew it was her. That night, I burned the clothes I'd worn to Oakwood. The memory of her eyes, her voice, her smell. It clung to me, staining me in ways I couldn't scrub away. I haven't slept in days. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, hear the scratching. And last night, the police radio on my nightstand crackled to life. Unit 319. Disturbance reported at Oakwood Apartments. Building C caller reports screaming from the third floor. I didn't expect the call to come at 3 a.m. That's the kind of hour where silence feels solid, where you can feel the weight of the world pressing down on your chest. It wasn't the ringtone that startled me, though. It was the name flashing on my phone. It was Officer Grant. He was my old partner from when I was on the force. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the incident. He was the last person I expected to reach out to, especially at this time of night. When I answered, his voice was shaky. Not drunk, not high, scared. It takes a lot to scare someone like Grant, who had spent decades chasing down the worst this city had to offer. I need you to come to the old North Point precinct, he said, barely above a whisper. I'm there now. Please. What are you doing at North Point? I asked. That station had been shut down for years after asbestos was discovered, along with other rumors, things I never put stock in, but others swore by. It's condemned. That's why I'm calling you, he said. Look, I can't explain it over the phone. You have to see it yourself. And then the line went dead. North Point Precinct had always given me the creeps, even back when it was operational. It was the kind of building that seemed alive in all the wrong ways. The kind of place where every creak of the floorboards and groan of the pipes sounded like a warning. I'd never been inside after it closed, but as I approached it that night, I realized it had somehow grown darker, more oppressive. The doors were chained shut, but the padlock was snapped, dangling loose. The chain itself lay coiled like a dead snake on the ground. Grant must have already let himself in. I pushed the heavy doors open and was hit with the stale, rotting air of a building left to die. The fluorescent lights were flickering weakly, casting everything in a sickly, uneven glow. It was dead quiet. Too quiet. No sound of rodents or wind sneaking through cracks. Just a heavy, unnatural silence. Grant, I called out, my voice echoing down the long, empty hallways. No answer. I gripped the flashlight in my hand tighter and moved forward, the beam cutting through the thick dust hanging in the air. Each step kicked up tiny clouds, and the squeak of my boots felt deafening. The walls were covered in old notices and flyers, their edges curled and yellowed with age. That's when I saw it. At the end of the hall near the squad room, there was something smeared on the walls. It was dark and wet, streaked in long lines, as though someone had dragged their fingers through it. Blood. Fresh blood. The logical part of my brain screamed for me to leave, to call someone, anyone, and let them handle this. But something else, something primal, urged me forward. The squad room was empty, except for a single desk lamp flickering weakly in the corner. Papers and files were scattered across the floor as if a tornado had swept through. And there, sitting in the middle of the chaos, was Grant. At least, I think it was him. He was hunched over, his back to me, his shoulders jerking erratically. His uniform was caked in grime and something darker. Blood? His head lolled to one side, and he mumbled something I couldn't make out. "Grant," I said cautiously, stepping closer. "What's going on?" He froze. His head snapped up, and he turned to face me. His eyes, they weren't right. They were wide and glassy, like he was staring straight through me. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. And then I noticed the cuts. Deep, jagged slashes across his arms and chest. They weren't random. They formed shapes, symbols that I didn't understand, but instinctively feared. "Grant," I said again, louder this time. "What the hell happened to you?" "They're coming," he rasped, barely audible. "They're here." Before I could respond, a sound erupted from behind me, a low, guttural growl that didn't belong to anything human. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, and pointed it down the hallway. The beam landed on nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, filling the air with a sense of suffocating dread. The shadows on the walls seemed to writhe and stretch, creeping toward me like living things. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. Grant let out a choked sob. "Don't look at them," he whispered. "Whatever you do, don't." His words were cut off by a deafening crash. The ceiling above us buckled and cracked, and something massive slammed into the ground, just feet away from where I stood. My flashlight flickered, the beam struggling to stay alive. And then I saw it. It wasn't a person, or even an animal. It was a shape, black and shifting, as though it were made of smoke and shadow. Its edges blurred and twisted, refusing to stay solid. But its eyes, they were there. 2 pinpoints of burning red light that pierced through the darkness. I didn't wait. I grabbed Grant by the arm and hauled him to his feet. He stumbled, muttering incoherently, but I didn't let go. We ran, or more accurately, I dragged him down the hallway, back toward the exit. The thing followed us, its movements impossibly fast, almost liquid. The shadows around it seemed to grow darker, swallowing the flickering light as it came closer. I could feel it behind me, its presence like ice crawling up my spine. We burst through the front doors and into the cold night air. The moment we crossed the threshold, the sound stopped. The oppressive weight lifted. I turned back, expecting to see it chasing us, but the doorway was empty. Just darkness, staring back. Grant collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air. I knelt beside him, my own breath ragged. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something out of his pocket, a small, tattered notebook. He handed it to me with trembling hands. "Answers," he whispered, "but you won't like them." I looked down at the notebook, its cover stained and frayed, and even though I hadn't opened it yet, I knew deep down that my life would never be the same again. The road stretched out endlessly, swallowed by a dense fog that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. The motel sign, flickering dimly, read, "Rest Haven Inn, vacancy." It was a beacon in the darkness, though not the kind you'd want to follow. I didn't have much of a choice. My car's engine sputtered to a halt miles back, and my phone had barely a sliver of battery left. The rain was relentless, hammering down on the hood as if trying to drown the world itself. I stepped out, drenched in seconds, and made my way toward the peeling sign. The motel was one of those places you'd drive past without a second glance. Paint chipped off the walls, the once pristine white now a sickly yellow. A neon open sign buzzed faintly in the window of the office, the light barely illuminating the single desk inside. As I entered, a bell above the door let out a harsh jingle. The man behind the counter was gaunt, his sunken eyes fixed on a small, old-fashioned TV playing static. He didn't look up until I cleared my throat. "Room?" he croaked, his voice a rasp that set my nerves on edge. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "For the night." He slid a key across the counter, its brass surface tarnished. "Room 7. Don't mind the noise." Noise? I didn't ask. I should have. The hallway to room 7 smelled faintly of mildew, and the carpet squished under my boots. The flickering light bulbs above cast strange, shifting shadows along the corridor. I turned the key in the lock, pushing the door open to reveal a cramped room with outdated furniture. A single lamp illuminated the space, its glow barely fighting back the encroaching darkness. I dropped my bag on the bed and exhaled. The rain beat against the window like 1,000 desperate hands. It wasn't ideal, but it would do. That was when I heard it. A faint scratching noise, coming from inside the closet. I froze, the weight of the room pressing down on me. The sound was faint, rhythmic, like nails dragging against wood. My rational side kicked in, whispering that it was just the rain or the old building settling. But something deeper, primal, told me otherwise. I took a hesitant step toward the closet. The floor creaked beneath my weight, and the noise stopped. Dead silence. Even the rain seemed to hush, as if the world was holding its breath. My hand trembled as I reached for the closet door handle. With a sharp yank, I flung the door open. Empty. Just a few rusted hangers swaying gently on the rod, their movement likely stirred by the draft. I let out a shaky laugh, scolding myself for being so jumpy. But as I turned back to the bed, I noticed something. The closet wasn't empty anymore. The hangers were still. But a dark shape had appeared in the back corner. A mass, tall, hunched and silent, almost blending into the shadows. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the bed. The thing didn't move. It was there, but wrong. The darkness seemed to warp around it, like it was swallowing light. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Nothing. And then it lurched forward. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock as my fingers refused to cooperate. Behind me, the thing shuffled closer, its breathing wet and raspy, like air being sucked through broken glass. I threw the door open and sprinted into the hallway, not daring to look back. The corridor stretched endlessly before me, far longer than it had been when I arrived. Every door I passed was closed, each one rattling violently as I ran. The flickering lights above dimmed, casting the hall in an eerie twilight. My lungs burned, my feet barely touching the ground as I reached the motel office. The gaunt man was gone. The static on the old TV had turned into faint whispers, an indistinct cacophony of voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I slammed my fists on the counter, shouting for help, but no one came. The whispers grew louder, and I felt the presence behind me again. Turning slowly, I saw it standing at the entrance. Only now, it was clearer. The figure was impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and contorted. Its face, or what should have been a face, was smooth and featureless, save for a slit that opened and closed, emitting that sickening, raspy breath. It stepped forward, and the motel seemed to shudder around us. Walls cracked, and the air grew dense, like trying to breathe underwater. I stumbled backward, grabbing at anything I could use as a weapon, my hand closing around an old desk lamp. Without thinking, I hurled it at the thing. The lamp shattered on impact, and for a brief moment the figure recoiled, its form flickering like a broken projection. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran. The rain hit me like a wall as I burst outside, the neon sign flickering violently above the door. My car, dead just hours ago, sat in the lot, its headlights glowing faintly. I didn't question it. I jumped in, turned the key, and, miraculously, the engine roared to life. As I sped down the empty road, the motel disappeared into the fog behind me. But even as I put miles between us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The rain on the windshield looked darker, thicker, almost like tar. The whispers from the office were still faintly audible, growing louder as I drove. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the figure sitting in the back seat. There's something about motels that never feels right. Maybe it's the lingering scent of bleach failing to cover something worse, or the flicker of a neon sign casting shadows where there shouldn't be any. That night, I pulled into a motel on a desolate stretch of highway, half dead from exhaustion and fully creeped out by the empty lobby. No one stood at the reception desk, just a small bell and a paper with the word "ring" written in shaky, faded letters. I hit the bell once. The ding echoed like I'd stepped into a void. Seconds dragged. Then a door creaked open behind the counter. A man shuffled out, a clerk, I assumed. His uniform was stained, his posture stooped like something heavy was pressing on his shoulders. His face was pale, the kind of pale that doesn't come from lack of sun, but something deeper, almost wrong. He handed me a key without a word and pointed down the dimly lit hallway. Room 107. I hesitated. Something about the key gave me pause. It was old, heavy brass, engraved with symbols too worn to read. "Everything okay?" I asked. The man didn't answer. He just turned, disappearing back through the door. I considered getting back in my car and driving until I hit civilization, but the fatigue anchored me. My brain whispered, "Just one night." The hallway stretched unnervingly long as I made my way to 107. The doors I passed seemed older than the building itself, their paint chipped and wood warped. The carpet squished under my feet like it had soaked up years of spills and secrets. When I reached my door, I noticed something odd. The door to room 106 was ajar. Dark inside, but I could see something swinging gently from the ceiling, brushing the edge of the frame. A chain? No, it looked like hair. I almost knocked, almost let my curiosity get the better of me. Instead, I hurried into 107, bolted the door, and let the heavy silence of the room settle around me. The bedspread was an unholy pattern of orange and green, torn in places. The air smelled faintly of damp earth. As I dropped my bag onto the bed, the first noise came, a low, rhythmic tapping from the adjoining wall. I froze. The tapping against the adjoining wall was faint at first, like fingers drumming on wood. My initial instinct was to rationalize it. Pipes, maybe. Or someone next door shifting in their bed. But it didn't stop. It grew louder, more deliberate, as though it was waiting for a response. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my nerves. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The tapping stopped. For a moment, the room was so silent, I could hear the faint buzz of the flickering overhead light. Then there was a noise, a low, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the carpet. It wasn't coming from the wall this time. It was coming from inside my room. My stomach dropped. The air grew cold enough for my breath to cloud in front of me. Slowly, I turned toward the closet. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling into the room. I stared, my pulse hammering in my ears. The dragging sound stopped. I reached for the lamp on the nightstand, gripping its cold base like a makeshift weapon. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing hard, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then, from behind the closet door, I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't clear words, more like a breathy murmur, but it was there, distinctly human. My fingers tightened around the lamp, and I forced myself to move. My knees shook as I took a step forward, then another. I stretched out a trembling hand and gripped the closet door. With a yank, I threw it open. Nothing. Just empty space, an old coat hanger, and a sour smell. I exhaled a shaky laugh, my body still tense with adrenaline. Get it together, I muttered to myself, shutting the door with a sharp click. That's when I noticed the mirror. It was hanging on the opposite wall, just above the small dresser, and in its reflection, I saw the closet door swinging open again, slowly, silently. But it wasn't empty this time. A figure stood there, too tall to fit in the closet naturally, its head hunched at an unnatural angle to avoid brushing the ceiling. Its limbs were impossibly long, its skin a grayish tone. The face, if you could call it that, was featureless, except for a mouth stretched into a gaping, soundless scream. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The thing stepped out of the closet, moving with a jerky, almost puppet-like motion. Into the mirror, I could see it approaching, its elongated arms stretching toward me. My fight or flight kicked in. I dropped the lamp and bolted for the door. The air grew heavier with every step, as though something was pulling me back. My vision blurred, and my ears were filled with a deafening, static-like hum. I wrenched the door open and stumbled into the hallway, slamming it behind me. I ran. The hallway seemed endless, the dim lighting flickering erratically. My chest burned, and my legs felt like lead, but I didn't stop. When I reached the lobby, it was empty again. The clerk was nowhere in sight. I burst through the front doors into the night, gasping for air. The neon sign above the motel flickered ominously as I fumbled for my car keys. When I glanced back at the building, I saw it. Room 107's window, glowing faintly. The curtain moved as if something or someone was watching me leave. I didn't stick around to find out. I drove for hours, not caring where I was going, just needing to put distance between me and that place. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station and sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The clerk inside gave me a strange look when I stumbled in for water. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I didn't feel it. As I paid, I noticed the TV behind the counter was playing the news. My stomach twisted as the headlines scrolled across the screen. Missing persons reports filed for guests of the Highway Motel. Authorities investigating multiple disappearances. The screen flashed photos of the missing. One of them looked eerily familiar, a face I'd seen in the mirror. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I just got in my car and drove, hoping to outrun the image burned into my memory. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd been marked that night, and no matter how far I drove, how fast, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still following me. The motel's vacancy sign buzzed dimly against the pitch-black highway, each flicker of the neon a whisper, luring me off the endless asphalt. It was nearly midnight, and exhaustion clawed at my skin. The voice in my head reasoned it was just a place to rest, a shower, a bed, and nothing else. But the moment I stepped into the lobby, I knew something was wrong. The clerk, a wiry man with sunken eyes and a face like wax, barely moved when I rang the bell. His gaze dragged across my face and stuck to me like flypaper. "Room 12, he muttered, tossing a key onto the counter with a thud. Don't wander the property at night." The warning should have been my first red flag, but I was too tired to care, muttering thanks as I grabbed the key. The room was about what you'd expect from a roadside dive. Cracked wallpaper, a bedspread patterned with stains, and a lamp that buzzed when you turned it on. I dropped my duffel on the bed and leaned back, letting the thin mattress groan under my weight. Outside, the night was silent, too silent. Even on a rural stretch of highway, you'd expect crickets or wind, not this suffocating, unnatural quiet. My eyes closed, and I must have drifted off, but it wasn't sleep that woke me. It was the sound of something dragging across the pavement. I froze, my heart thudding in my ears. Slowly, I sat up, listening. The sound came again, a rhythmic scrape, like a shovel being pulled against gravel. It was close, too close. I crept to the window, my breath fogging the glass as I peered out into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing, just the empty parking lot, the dim glow of the vacancy sign, and the shadow of the woods beyond. Then I saw it. A figure, tall, hunched, and moving unnaturally, dragged something heavy across the asphalt. I couldn't make out much, but the glint of metal in its hand sent a chill up my spine. The thing it was dragging, it wasn't a bag or an object. It was limp, human. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. I stood there paralyzed as the dragging sound faded into the woods. When I finally found the courage to step outside, the air was thick with a damp, metallic smell. The kind that clings to your throat and makes your stomach churn. The parking lot was empty, save for a dark smear leading toward the tree line. Against all better judgment, I followed it. My flashlight barely pierced the thick shadows of the woods, but the trail was unmistakable. Crushed grass, broken branches, and that same horrifying drag mark. The deeper I went, the colder it got. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that settles in your bones and whispers for you to turn back. And then I heard it. A low guttural sound, halfway between a growl and a laugh. It echoed through the trees, circling me. My flashlight flickered, and for a terrifying moment, I was plunged into total darkness. When it came back on, I saw it. Standing just a few feet away was the figure. Its face, or what should have been its face, was covered in a stretched, leathery mask. Its eyes were hollow pits, and its grin, that grin was too wide, splitting its face from ear to ear. It tilted its head, studying me, before lifting the object in its hand, a rusted meat hook. I didn't wait for it to move. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the forest floor. The sound of its laughter followed me, growing louder with each step. I burst out of the woods, slamming into the motel door and locking it behind me. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold the flashlight. Then the dragging sound returned. This time, it was outside my room. I backed away from the door, my eyes locked on the crack at the bottom. A shadow passed, and then a sharp, metallic tap echoed against the wood. Tap, tap, tap. It was testing the lock. In a panic, I grabbed my duffel and threw it out the window, crawling after it. As I hit the ground, the door splintered behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I was back on the highway, the glow of the motel's vacancy sign fading in the distance. It wasn't until I reached the next town that I realized the truth. The motel clerk's warning hadn't been about the woods or the night. It had been about the room itself. Room 12 was locked for a reason. I didn't tell anyone about what happened that night. Not the gas station attendant, where I stopped to clean the blood from my hands. Not the cops when I tried to explain why my car was abandoned, miles down the highway. Every time I opened my mouth to speak, the words caught in my throat, like my brain refused to let them out. But I couldn't forget it. Couldn't shake the sound of the dragging. Couldn't scrub the image of that thing's face, or lack of a face, from my memory. I should have just moved on, left it as one of those unsolved mysteries that people chalk up to sleep deprivation or too much stress. But something about that night kept gnawing at me. Maybe it was the clerk's warning, or the unnatural quiet of the woods, or the fact that no one, absolutely no one, seemed to have stayed at that motel in years. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I found myself Googling the place, scrolling through pages of reviews, local news stories, and any scrap of information I could find. It wasn't much. The motel didn't even have a name, just a vague listing on some outdated website that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. But I did find one thing: a forum post from years back, written by someone who claimed to have worked there as a cleaner. "Don't go near room 12, asterisk," it read. "If the clerk gives you the key, refuse it. People disappear in that room. I quit after what I saw. Couldn't stay another night." No details, no follow-up, just those cryptic words. But that wasn't the worst of it. As I kept digging, I found an old news article, buried deep, almost as if someone didn't want it to be found. The headline read, "Missing couple's car, found near abandoned motel." The photo of the couple hit me like a gut punch. The man's face was vaguely familiar, balding, middle-aged, with a slight limp. The same man I'd seen on the security footage in the lobby. The one who'd stepped out of that asterisk in the woods without a limp. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Could it have been a coincidence? Some sort of strange, twisted hallucination? No, I'd seen too much. Against every instinct, I made the decision to go back. Not for answers. I doubted I'd get those. But to make sure that whatever was in that room, in those woods, couldn't hurt anyone else. The drive was longer this time. The highway felt emptier, darker. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, the neon vacancy sign was flickering, like it had been waiting for me. The clerk was gone, the desk empty. The place looked even worse than I remembered. Cracks in the walls, windows boarded up with rotting plywood. But the key to room 12 was still on the counter, resting on a layer of dust, waiting. I grabbed it and made my way down the hallway. My flashlight's beam cut through the dark, revealing peeling paint and doors hanging off their hinges. Room 12 was at the end, its door intact. The number was barely visible, scratched into the wood like someone had tried to erase it. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I slid the key into the lock. The room was cold, not the kind of cold you'd get from a busted heater, but a deep, unnatural chill that seemed to suck the air from my lungs. The bed was still there, the same stained mattress sagging in the middle, but the rest of the room, it was empty, stripped bare, like it hadn't been used in decades. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me as I whipped around, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. The temperature dropped further, frost creeping across the window like icy veins. Then I heard it. The dragging sound, louder than ever. It wasn't coming from outside this time. It was coming from under the bed. I froze, every instinct screaming for me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The dragging grew louder, closer. Then slowly, a hand emerged from the darkness beneath the bed. Not a human hand, too long, too thin, its nails blackened and curling like claws. It gripped the edge of the mattress, and then another hand followed, pulling the rest of it into view. The figure was the same as before, faceless, grinning, its body twisted and wrong. But now, I could see what it was dragging behind it. Me. It was my face, my body, limp and lifeless, staring back at me, with dead eyes. The room spun, reality unraveling, as the figure crawled toward me, its grin widening. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. But before the void consumed me, I heard the voice of the clerk, faint and distant. "I told you, don't wander at night." I woke up in my car, parked miles from the motel. The key to room 12 was in my lap, and my knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel. I don't know how I escaped. I don't know if I escaped, but every now and then, when I'm alone at night, I hear the dragging sound again. You'd think that driving an 18-wheeler through endless highways at night would make you immune to fear. I mean, I've seen it all. Road rage, accidents, even a guy walking naked on Route 66 like he was auditioning for a horror flick. But what happened last month? That wasn't the usual trucker nightmare. That was something else. Something wrong. I'm hauling cargo across Nebraska, about 2 a.m. The road is a strip of black slicing through miles of flat nothingness. It's quiet except for the steady hum of the rig's engine, the kind of quiet that lets your thoughts wander to dark places. Then, my CB radio crackled to life. "Breaker 19, you out there?" The voice was low, shaky. I hesitated. Usually it's other truckers chatting about routes, weather, or just swapping jokes to kill the boredom. But something in his voice had me grabbing the mic. "Yeah, this is Long Haul. What's up?" Static hissed for a moment before his reply came through. I think I'm being followed." "Followed?" I asked, gripping the wheel tighter. My eyes scanned the rearview mirrors out of reflex, even though I knew the highway behind me was empty. "You sure about that? Ain't nobody out here but us." The radio crackled again, and his voice came through more frantic this time. "It's not a car. I don't know what it is. It's been tailing me since mile marker 240. Every time I look back, it's closer." "Closer? What are you seeing, man?" I asked, feeling a bead of sweat roll down my temple. Nebraska highways don't exactly have streetlights, and whatever he was dealing with was probably some stray animal or a trick of the dark. He didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a long pause, filled only with static, before he finally whispered, "Eyes." "Eyes?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. "Yeah," he said, his voice trembling. "Like headlights, but wrong. Too low to the ground, and they flicker, like they're blinking. I swear to God, man, it's watching me." I glanced at my GPS. Mile marker 240 was about 10 miles behind me. Whatever was happening to this guy, it wasn't far off. "All right, buddy, stay calm. Where are you now?" "Just past mile marker 250. It's still back there, but it's closer. I can feel it." His voice cracked, and for the first time, I heard real terror in his words. This wasn't just highway paranoia. He truly believed something was after him. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a rest stop at 255. Bright lights, other truckers. Head there, and I'll meet you." "No," he snapped, almost yelling. "It won't let me stop. Every time I slow down, it gets closer. I can hear it, like claws scraping the pavement." My blood ran cold. I turned on my high beams, as if that would somehow protect me. "What's your rig?" I asked. "I'll look for you on the road." "Freightliner Cascadia. White cab, red trailer," he muttered. "But I don't think you'll make it in time." Then the radio went dead. I grabbed the mic again. "Breaker 19, you there? Talk to me." Static hissed in response. My heart pounded as I pushed the accelerator, the engine growling as the truck surged forward. I was determined to catch up to him, or at least see what the hell was going on. At mile marker 252, I spotted him. A white Freightliner with a red trailer barreled down the highway ahead of me, swerving erratically. His brake lights flickered, as though he was trying to stop, but couldn't. Then I saw them. Eyes. Two faint yellowish glows, low to the ground, darting in and out of the darkness behind his trailer. They weren't headlights. They were alive. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, my palms slick against the steering wheel. The glowing orbs moved like they were studying him, stalking him. Then, they shifted focus. To me. I felt my chest tighten as the eyes blinked, slowly, deliberately, and locked onto my truck. Suddenly, the Freightliner veered off the road, its horn blaring in a panicked howl. It disappeared into the cornfields, leaving me alone with whatever had been chasing it. The glowing eyes began to speed up, closing the distance between us. I floored it. My rig groaned under the strain, the speedometer climbing past limits I knew weren't safe for a truck this size. But the eyes kept up, growing brighter, hungrier. The road ahead blurred as adrenaline coursed through me. Then I heard it, a scraping like metal on asphalt. It wasn't coming from my rig. It was coming from underneath it. My radio came back to life with an ear-splitting burst of static. A voice came through, distorted and guttural, nothing like the man I'd been speaking to earlier. "You can't outrun it." The sound of claws raked across my trailer, and I felt the whole truck shudder. I gritted my teeth, swerving wildly to shake whatever was beneath me. The weight shifted, and I nearly lost control, the trailer fishtailing dangerously close to the edge of the road. Up ahead, the rest stop appeared like a beacon of hope, its floodlights cutting through the darkness. I didn't slow down. I couldn't. The eyes vanished just as I burst into the parking lot, skidding to a halt amid a few other rigs. My hands trembled as I killed the engine and jumped out of the cab. Nothing. No glowing eyes. No claws. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant chirp of crickets. Other truckers looked at me like I was crazy as I inspected the underside of my truck. Deep gouges ran along the metal, like something with claws had been clinging to it. My legs felt like jelly as I slumped against the side of the cab, breathing hard. "Hey, you all right?" one of the truckers asked, stepping closer. I opened my mouth to speak, but froze when I saw it. Out in the distance, just beyond the edge of the floodlights, two faint yellow eyes blinked. Then they disappeared into the darkness. I quit long hauls the next day. Let me tell you something. Long-haul trucking is not for the faint of heart, not just because of the endless miles or the isolation, but because of the things you see at night. I've been on the road for over 15 years, driving through every back road, highway, and nowhere town you can imagine. Nothing shakes me easily, but one night, one stretch of black asphalt made me question everything. It was a clear autumn night when I picked up a late delivery from a warehouse in Kentucky, heading west to Missouri. The load wasn't anything out of the ordinary, crates of furniture, some tools, but the route took me through a patch of the Appalachians that's more shadows than road after dark. Truckers call it the Devil's Backbone. Why? Because people and vehicles disappear there. But nobody ever really talks about it. We just drive. As I crossed into the mountains, the CB radio crackled. A gruff voice, another trucker said, "Breaker 19, anyone rolling through Backbone tonight might want to steer clear." Silence. I should have turned around then, but I didn't. Superstitions, I muttered to myself. Besides, I had a deadline to meet. An hour later, the road narrowed. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick trees overhead. My headlights fought against the ink-like darkness. The forest leaned too close, like it was watching. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, a shape darted into the road. I slammed on the brakes, my trailer screeching and groaning behind me. The truck stopped inches from what looked like a deer. No, not a deer. It was too tall, too thin. The thing turned its head toward me, and I swear its face wasn't right. Black eyes, like a doll's eyes, and its mouth, jagged like it had too many teeth. It tilted its head almost curiously before lurching away into the woods. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. My instincts screamed to keep driving, but my engine stalled. That's when I saw the scratches. 3 deep parallel gashes raked across my hood. Fresh, the kind no animal leaves behind. The CB buzzed again, but it wasn't static this time. A low growl came through, like an animal, or a man imitating one. "Still rolling, driver?" A voice rasped, half laughing, half snarling. I was about to radio back, demand who it was, but the air in the cab grew cold. Breath fogged in front of me, though my heater was blasting full, and the forest, so loud with crickets and wind minutes before, had gone dead silent. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, slow, something big, something deliberate. I refused to look out the window, but in my mirror, I saw the outline of something. Something tall. Too tall. It stood just beyond the reach of my brake lights, watching. A gut instinct I'd never felt before screamed at me to stay in the cab. The truck finally roared back to life. I floored it, the trailer swaying as I tore through the twists and turns. The further I got, the more the feeling of being hunted lessened. But it wasn't over. 30 miles later, I pulled into a rest stop, one of those desolate lots with a vending machine and a flickering light. Another rig was parked there, engine off, but no driver in sight. I stepped out, my boots crunching gravel, and checked my hood. Those gashes, they weren't just scratches anymore. They were smoking, smoldering like they'd been branded into the metal. And then, from the woods beside the lot, came a laugh. Not a man's laugh, not a child's laugh. It was distorted, like a tape player chewing on a bad recording. The hairs on my arms stood on end. "Driver," the same voice from the CB crooned, but this time it wasn't over the radio. It was in the air, behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. Just my truck, just the woods. But deep in those trees, I swear, I saw eyes. Not 2, dozens, blinking in unison. I didn't stay to find out what they belonged to. I climbed back into my rig, locked the doors, and drove until dawn. When I finally reached Missouri, the scratches on my hood were gone, replaced by pristine metal, like nothing had ever happened. But I know what I saw. And every time I pass through Appalachia, I see those same blinking eyes in my nightmares. If you're driving through the Devil's Backbone, keep your eyes forward, your windows shut, and don't stop for anything. A week passed, but the shadows of that night followed me. Truck stops felt quieter than usual, the roads darker, and the CB radio, even when silent, felt ominous. The scratches may have disappeared from my truck, but the memory of them burned in my mind. And then, the real nightmare began. My next haul was a routine trip, heading south toward Alabama, a midnight run. As always, I preferred driving at night. Less traffic, more peace. But peace was the last thing I found. It started with my GPS going haywire. One moment it showed a straight route. The next, my truck icon spun wildly, as if I'd veered off-road. I checked my map, recalibrated, and pushed on. That's when I noticed something. The mile markers weren't right. Each marker was different. One read 142, then the next said 666. I laughed it off, thinking I was seeing things. But the markers grew stranger. End. Turn back. And one that simply read run. The rational part of me fought to dismiss it. A prank, bad lighting, or exhaustion. But deep down, I knew better. And then I saw the rig. It was pulled over on the shoulder, headlights blazing. The truck looked abandoned, door swinging gently in the breeze. I slowed, radioing out of habit. Breaker 19, you need a hand, driver. Static. The closer I got, the more I noticed something wasn't right. The rig's cab was empty, but the trailer doors hung open, swaying like something or someone had forced them apart. What stopped me cold was the graffiti scrawled across the trailer in thick black letters. Nothing leaves. I slammed the accelerator. My rig roared forward, the abandoned truck disappearing in my mirror. About 10 minutes later, my CB crackled. You left something behind, driver. A voice whispered, raspy and wet, like someone speaking underwater. Who is this? I snapped, my voice shaking. Silence. Then another sound, a scraping, like nails on metal. My stomach dropped as I realized it wasn't coming from the CB. It was coming from the trailer. Whatever it was, it had hitched a ride. My headlights caught a curve in the road ahead, forcing me to slow down. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, as if whatever was back there knew I was easing up. I gripped the wheel, heart pounding, until I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled over, leaving the engine running, and grabbed my flashlight. As I stepped out, the night wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy, too quiet. I circled to the rear of the trailer, every crunch of gravel under my boots echoing too loud. My flashlight beam trembled as I pointed it at the doors. Deep gouges raked across the metal, forming patterns. No, symbols. My hands were sweating, but I reached for the handle. The moment I unlatched it, the doors flew open, and someone lunged at me. I stumbled back, falling hard on the asphalt. It was a man, or what used to be one. His skin was gray and stretched taut, his eyes sunken, but blazing with a sickly yellow light. His mouth twisted into an inhuman grin as he crawled toward me, on all fours, faster than any human should. I scrambled back, yelling, "Stay the hell away!" But he didn't stop. His movements were jerky, like a puppet on strings, and his grin widened impossibly as he reached out. That's when I heard it. The sound of tires screeching, a horn blaring, and then the crunch of impact. Another truck coming around the bend had plowed into the figure, throwing it into the ditch. I staggered to my feet, breathing hard, as the driver of the other rig jumped out. "You okay?" he asked, looking me over. I pointed to the ditch, but when we checked, the thing was gone. Only a smear of dark, oily blood remained. We didn't talk much after that. The other driver offered to follow me to the nearest truck stop, and I didn't argue. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but the entire time, I felt those eyes on me, watching, waiting. When I reached the stop, I parked, climbed into the sleeper, and locked every door. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness, that thing was still lurking. I never drove through the Devil's Backbone again, and I'll never forget the lesson I learned that night. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:43 a.m. The highway was dead, a straight ribbon of asphalt vanishing into the darkness. My CB radio crackled faintly with static, the voices of distant truckers trading stories to stay awake. I adjusted my cap and yawned, the hum of my 18-wheeler lulling me into a dangerous sense of calm. Then, out of nowhere, a voice broke through the static. "Eastbound on I-70. Anyone else seeing this?" The voice was shaky, breathless, like someone who just ran a marathon. I grabbed the mic. "Eastbound here. What's going on?" Static swallowed his reply, but I heard enough to send chills down my spine. "Black semi. No lights. Coming up fast." I shifted in my seat, suddenly wide awake. My headlights illuminated nothing but the road ahead, bordered by skeletal trees and the occasional mile marker. I checked my rearview mirrors. Nothing but empty black. "Anyone else out there?" The voice called again, this time frantic. "Calm down." I said into the mic. "Where are you exactly?" I think mile marker 82. It's behind me." "Oh God, it's right on me." The transmission cut out with a burst of static. My heart thudded against my rib cage. Mile marker 82 was about 10 miles ahead. I pressed harder on the gas, my truck rumbling as it picked up speed. I don't know why I felt compelled to go faster. Curiosity? Duty? Or maybe some primal part of me was already screaming, "You should turn back." 10 minutes later, I reached marker 82. The asphalt gleamed under my headlights, but the road ahead was empty. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter. My CB buzzed again, but it was faint this time, almost garbled. "Don't stop." The message made my skin crawl. I rolled my window down slightly, letting in the cold air. That's when I noticed something. The faint sound of a horn, long and mournful, echoing in the distance. It wasn't coming from the highway ahead. It was coming from behind me. I checked my mirrors again. This time, there it was. Far in the distance, but unmistakable. A massive black semi, its outline barely visible against the night. No headlights, no running lights, just a hulking shadow on wheels. My pulse spiked as I grabbed the CB mic. "Whoever's out there, is this some kind of joke?" I asked. But my voice betrayed the fear clawing at my throat. The response came in a whisper so faint I had to strain to hear it. "It's not a truck. Don't stop. Don't let it catch you." The shadow in my mirrors grew larger. It was closing in, fast. I pushed the gas pedal to the floor, the roar of my engine filling the cab. My trailer swayed as my speed climbed past 80, then 85. But no matter how fast I went, the black semi kept gaining. Its horn blasted low and guttural, vibrating through my chest. It wasn't the horn of any truck I'd ever heard. It sounded almost alive. The CB crackled again, and the faint whisper returned. "Don't look at it. Whatever you do, don't look at it." I didn't want to, but when the thing roared up beside me, I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head. The cab of the black semi was empty. No driver, just a void where a driver should have been. The windows weren't tinted. They were black holes, devouring the light of my headlights. The truck's grille was bent into a wicked snarl, like some kind of metal maw. I yanked my eyes back to the road and slammed the accelerator harder. My truck groaned under the strain. The black semi swerved, its shadowy mass brushing against my trailer. Sparks flew, lighting the darkness like fireworks. "Get off the highway," the CB hissed. There was an exit up ahead, barely lit by a single flickering lamp. Without thinking, I veered toward it, tires screeching as I took the turn too fast. My truck wobbled but held steady as I barreled down the narrow exit ramp and onto a deserted country road. For a moment, I thought I'd lost it. The road stretched out empty before me, flanked by fields of tall grass swaying in the wind. My shoulders sagged with relief. But then the horn sounded again, closer this time, and my blood ran cold. In my side mirror, I saw it. The black semi was following me off the highway. "Leave me alone," I shouted into the CB, but the static gave no reply. The road grew narrower, twisting and turning through the darkness. The black semi's headlights, no, the absence of headlights, loomed behind me, swallowing the faint glow of the moon. Up ahead I saw it, a bridge, old, rickety, and far too narrow for two trucks. I didn't slow down. If the thing wanted to take me out, it would have to follow me across. The bridge groaned as my truck rolled onto it. Wooden planks creaked and snapped under my weight. I made it halfway across before I heard a deafening crash behind me. I glanced in the mirror and saw the black semi barreling onto the bridge. Its sheer size was too much for the old structure. The wood splintered, and the bridge began to collapse. I floored it, the edge of the bridge just a few yards away. The black semi's horn blared one last time, a guttural scream that sent chills down my spine. Then the bridge gave out entirely. I felt my rear tires hit solid ground, just as the rest of the bridge crumbled into the river below. I slammed on the brakes and skidded to a stop, my chest heaving. Behind me, the black semi disappeared into the churning water, its horn fading into silence. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the empty road ahead. The CB crackled once more, a final whisper cutting through the static. "You made it, but it'll be back." I never took that route again. Hell, I've never driven at night since. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't a truck. And if it ever comes for you, don't stop. Don't look at it, just run. It was supposed to be a quiet escape, a weekend alone in a cabin deep in the woods, no distractions, just me, a few books, and the endless sound of leaves brushing against the wind. I had rented the place off a small website that specialized in remote getaways. No ratings, no reviews, but the photos sold me. It looked peaceful, and God knows I needed peace. I arrived just before sunset, and everything seemed perfect. The cabin stood in a clearing, surrounded by tall pines that swallowed most of the sky. There was a creek nearby, and the air smelled of moss and damp earth. Inside, it was cozy, a wood-burning stove, a single bed, and an old oak table by a window overlooking the woods. But the first oddity, the key wasn't where the owner said it would be. The email instructions were clear. Keys under the mat. It wasn't. I ended up finding it inside the mailbox, and while that wasn't too strange, it still gave me pause. Who leaves keys in a mailbox? Shaking it off, I unlocked the door, dropped my bag, and settled in. By the time the sun dipped below the tree line, I was already sipping a cup of tea and flipping through a novel. It felt like the beginning of the tranquility I'd been chasing. That peace didn't last long. Just as darkness enveloped the cabin, I heard the sound, a faint rhythmic tapping. I froze, straining my ears. It came from the window by the oak table, a soft yet deliberate knock, 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 as if someone, or something, was using a single finger to tap the glass. I turned slowly, heart pounding. There was nothing there. Just blackness, no moonlight, no stars, just an impenetrable void. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe a branch, and forced my attention back to the book. The tapping stopped, but 5 minutes later, it started again. This time, from the front door. I didn't get up. Something deep in my gut told me not to. Instead, I grabbed my phone and checked for signal. No bars. Figures. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. The tapping ceased. A long silence followed. Then, as if it was mocking me, the sound moved to the back door. Knock, knock, knock. I wanted to laugh at how cliché it was. I even muttered to myself, "You're imagining things." But I knew I wasn't. The sound was too real, too calculated. Gathering my courage, I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and approached the back door. My hand shook as I reached for the knob, the beam of light jittering across the wood. When I finally opened it, there was nothing. Just darkness and the quiet hum of the forest. Then I looked down. Footprints. They weren't human. The prints were elongated, with claw-like marks digging into the soft dirt. My heart dropped. They led away from the cabin, disappearing into the blackness of the trees. I slammed the door and locked it. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to leave, but my car was parked half a mile down the dirt road. No way was I walking through those woods at night. I decided to wait it out, sitting in the middle of the room with every light in the cabin on. Hours passed, and nothing happened. No more tapping. No more footprints. By 3 a.m., I convinced myself I'd overreacted, that it was probably an animal, and I was being ridiculous. I managed to fall asleep. Then I woke up to the sound of breathing. It was faint, shallow, and right outside the bedroom window. I didn't move, didn't even breathe myself. My eyes darted to the clock. 4:13 a.m. The breathing grew louder, more labored, and then something scraped against the window. My stomach churned as the scraping turned to a low, guttural growl. I reached for the flashlight, but I didn't turn it on. Instead, I crept out of bed, moving silently toward the window. I positioned myself just out of sight, and with one swift motion, pulled back the curtain. The flashlight beam revealed a face. It wasn't human. The skin was pale, stretched tightly over a skull-like structure. Its eyes were black voids, reflecting the beam like polished obsidian. The mouth, filled with jagged teeth, was impossibly wide, and it twisted into something that could only be described as a grin. I screamed, dropping the flashlight as the creature lunged at the glass, its claws raking against it. The window didn't break, but the force of its attack sent me scrambling backward. I didn't think. I grabbed my bag, threw on my boots, and bolted out the front door. I didn't care about the woods, or the dark, or the footprints. Anything was better than staying in that cabin. As I sprinted down the dirt road, I could hear it behind me. Its guttural growls and heavy, uneven footsteps grew louder, closer. I didn't dare look back. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. The creature's growls were just feet away when I finally got the door open and threw myself inside. I started the engine and peeled out of there, the tires kicking up gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw it standing in the middle of the road, its wide grin illuminated by the red glow of my taillights. I drove straight to the nearest town and didn't stop until I was parked in a well-lit gas station. I spent the rest of the night in the car, locked with the engine running, until the sun came up. I told myself I'd call the cabin owner, demand an explanation, maybe even report what I'd seen, but I never did, because deep down, I knew no one would believe me. And honestly, I don't want to know what that thing was. I didn't go home that morning. Instead, I drove aimlessly, putting as much distance as possible between me and that cabin. Every so often, I'd glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that thing following me down the road. But the road remained empty, save for the occasional car or truck. After about 3 hours of driving, I pulled into a diner off the highway. My hands were still trembling as I sipped a cup of coffee, the warmth doing little to settle my nerves. The waitress noticed my state, but thankfully she didn't ask questions. I couldn't have answered them if she had. Once I felt steady enough, I pulled out my phone. Despite the terrible signal, I managed to search for the rental website. But when I typed in the address of the cabin, something strange happened. The listing was gone. No photos, no description, nothing. It was as if it had never existed. A chill ran down my spine. How could that be? I checked my email for the confirmation details, the payment receipt, anything to prove I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The emails were gone, completely wiped from my inbox. I stared at the screen, trying to process what this meant. My mind raced with possibilities. Had the owner taken it down after what happened? Did someone erase it deliberately? Or was it something worse? Something I couldn't begin to understand. As I sat there, the events of the previous night played over and over in my head. The tapping, the footprints, the creature's face, and that grin. God, I'd never forget that grin. It wasn't just a predator's smile. It was knowing, as if it took pleasure in my terror. By the time I left the diner, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to talk about it. Not to the police, Not to friends, not to anyone. People wouldn't believe me, and honestly, I didn't want them to. The last thing I needed was someone curious enough to go looking for that place. For weeks after, I had nightmares. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing that guttural growl or feeling the weight of those black, empty eyes staring at me. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the mind, some bizarre hallucination brought on by stress and isolation. But deep down, I knew better. About a month later, something happened that shattered whatever flimsy logic I'd been clinging to. I was at a friend's housewarming party, trying to force some normalcy back into my life. I'd been avoiding social gatherings, but this one felt safe. Just a few familiar faces, some drinks, and no mention of cabins or woods. For a while, it worked. I almost felt like myself again. Then someone new arrived, a friend of a friend. He was tall, lanky, and a little awkward. Nothing unusual. But as he stepped into the room, I felt my stomach drop. There was something about the way he moved, the way his eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. It reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. And then he smiled. It wasn't the same grin, not exactly. But there was an echo of it in the way his lips curled, just a little too wide. His teeth just a little too sharp. I froze, my drink slipping from my hand and shattering on the floor. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at me. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, I swore I saw something flicker in their depths, something dark and endless, like the void outside that cabin window. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice perfectly normal, perfectly human. I muttered an apology, blaming the spilled drink, and quickly excused myself. But as I left the party, I felt his gaze follow me all the way to the door. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew where I'd been, what I'd seen, maybe even what had followed me back. That was a year ago. I moved to a new city after that, far from any woods or cabins. I keep to myself, avoiding crowds and strangers, and I never ever let myself be alone at night. But every so often I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow that moves just a little too fast, or a figure standing too still in a crowded place. And when I look, it's gone. I don't know what I brought back from that cabin, or if it was ever truly gone in the first place. All I know is this: some doors once opened can never be closed. The cabin wasn't supposed to be rented out that night. That's what the guy at the front desk mumbled, his eyes darting nervously between me and the old reservation book. "Ah, yes, we had a cancellation," he said, sliding the key across the counter without meeting my gaze. You'll have it all to yourself." That's what I wanted, a secluded retreat in the middle of nowhere. It had been a rough year, and the idea of quiet solitude in a rustic, isolated cabin seemed like a perfect way to reset. Still, his hesitation nagged at me as I drove up the winding gravel path into the woods. The cabin sat on a ridge overlooking a dark, still lake. It looked just as advertised, cozy, weathered, and welcoming. But as I parked my car and stepped out into the cold air, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Something about the way the trees seemed to close in, the utter lack of sound, felt wrong. Shaking it off, I hauled my bags inside and locked the door. The interior was just as quaint as I'd hoped: a stone fireplace, hand-carved furniture, and a creaky old staircase leading to a loft bedroom. The only oddity was the massive antique mirror mounted above the fireplace, its ornate frame gleaming in the flickering light of the single lantern I'd brought in. I remember thinking it didn't fit the rustic aesthetic. It was too grand, too heavy, almost regal. Its reflective surface seemed to suck up the dim light, making the room feel darker. I shrugged and lit the fire, settling in for what I thought would be an uneventful night. The fire crackled warmly, its glow casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Despite the warmth, an unease I couldn't shake lingered. It wasn't the isolation, I'd craved that, but the oppressive quiet. No wind in the trees, no chirping insects, not even the gentle lap of the lake against the shore. It was as if the world beyond the cabin didn't exist. I chalked it up to nerves and poured myself a drink, sinking into the worn armchair by the fire. The mirror loomed above me, reflecting the flames in a strange, warped way. I tried to ignore it, but my eyes kept drifting back, drawn by a flicker of movement. Something in the reflection, just at the edge, didn't match the room. I leaned forward, squinting at the mirror. Behind me, the reflection showed a faint shadowy figure standing near the staircase. My heart stopped. Slowly, I turned my head. Nothing. Just the empty staircase. I laughed it off, a trick of the light, I told myself. The whiskey playing games. I decided to head to bed. Climbing the creaky stairs, I tried to ignore how the air seemed heavier, thicker, as if the cabin itself was exhaling around me. The loft bedroom was cozy, the bed piled high with heavy quilts. I crawled in, pulling the covers tight, but sleep didn't come easily. Every sound seemed amplified, the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the faint rustle of the trees outside, and footsteps. No, that was impossible. I froze, listening intently. There it was again. Soft, deliberate, moving across the cabin floor below me. My throat went dry. I had locked the door, hadn't I? Quietly, I slipped out of bed and crept to the edge of the loft. Peering down into the living room, my stomach churned. The fire had gone out, leaving the room in darkness, except for the mirror. It shimmered faintly, like a pond catching moonlight, and in its surface, I saw them. Figures. Dozens of them, moving in the room below, their shapes vague and wrong. They didn't walk. They drifted, their limbs too long, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. I stumbled back, my foot catching on the edge of the rug. The noise echoed through the cabin, and instantly all movement in the mirror stopped. Every figure turned, their hollow eyes locking onto me. Then, one by one, they began to climb the stairs. Panic surged through me. I ran to the bed and grabbed the lantern, its feeble light casting weak beams into the dark. The footsteps were louder now, impossibly heavy. I could hear the wood groan under their weight. I didn't wait to see what would emerge from the shadows. I bolted for the window. I threw it open, the icy air biting my face. The drop wasn't far, maybe 10 feet, but the ground below was jagged with rocks and tree roots. Behind me, I heard the creak of the top step. No time. I jumped, landing hard and rolling painfully onto my side. For a moment, I lay there, gasping, until I heard them again. The footsteps now outside, crunching on the gravel path behind me. I didn't look back. I ran, crashing through the woods, branches clawing at my face and arms. The forest felt endless, the trees pressing in from all sides. I stumbled into the lake's clearing, its black water rippling faintly in the moonlight. My car was just ahead, parked near the edge. I could see the faint glint of its windshield. Behind me, the footsteps grew louder, faster. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I yanked the door open and threw myself inside. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the car into reverse, spinning it around on the narrow path. In the rear-view mirror, I saw them, standing at the tree line, their shapes blending with the shadows. They didn't follow, just stood there, watching, as I sped away. I didn't stop driving until the sun rose, until the sight of other cars and open fields reassured me I was back in the world of the living. I told myself I'd imagined it, that isolation had played tricks on me. But that doesn't explain the scratches on my arms, or the faint handprints on the inside of the car window. I'll never know what those things were, or why they were waiting for me in that cabin. But I know this. Sometimes solitude isn't peaceful. It's a trap set for the living by something that doesn't belong in our world. And it almost had me. The crunch of gravel beneath the tires was the first thing that struck me. That, and the way the towering pines swallowed the light whole. The rental cabin looked like it had been sitting there for decades, nestled in the woods just outside of Asheville. It wasn't on the map. Not really. The listing on the site was vague. Rustic charm for nature lovers. And the directions were handwritten by the owner, complete with warnings about spotty GPS. It was my first night alone in years. No roommates, no partner, no one asking me for a thing. Just me, a couple of horror novels, and a weekend of silence. Heaven, right? I stepped out of the car, the late October air biting at my skin. The cabin was unassuming, wooden slats weathered gray, a roof that slumped slightly, and windows fogged with grime. It was perched on a slight hill, overlooking a lake that glittered under the sliver of moonlight. The first thing I noticed inside was the smell. Damp wood and something faintly sour, like milk left too long in the sun. I told myself it was normal for old cabins. The second thing was the silence. Not the comforting quiet I'd imagined, but an oppressive, heavy stillness. Even the frogs and crickets outside seemed muted. I unpacked quickly, shoving my bag into the only bedroom, before making myself a mug of cocoa. By 9 p.m., I was curled up in an old armchair, with a tattered blanket, book in hand. I thought I'd feel at peace. Instead, I felt watched. It was subtle at first, that weird sixth sense we all get sometimes. But then, halfway through a chapter, I caught it. The unmistakable sound of floorboards creaking. My eyes darted to the hallway. Empty. It's an old house, I mumbled to myself. Houses creak. It's nothing. But my gut churned, because the creak hadn't come from just anywhere. It was right outside the bedroom door. I closed the book, stood up, and walked over, trying to steady my breathing. The hallway stretched into darkness, broken only by the faint outline of the bedroom door. I stepped closer, flipping the light switch. Nothing happened. The bulb above me flickered and stayed dead. Another creak. Not the wood this time. This was behind me, the living room window. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. The chair I'd been sitting in was now turned slightly, facing the window. I hadn't touched it. I would have heard if it scraped across the floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response, just the wind rattling the trees outside. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was paranoia. Maybe I hadn't noticed the chair before. I locked the front door, checked the windows, and double-checked the back door before heading to bed. My skin prickled as I lay there in the dark, every creak and groan of the cabin amplified by the silence. But nothing happened. I drifted off eventually. I don't know what woke me. Maybe the cold, maybe the silence. But at 3:17 a.m., my eyes snapped open. I wasn't alone. There was breathing, slow, deliberate, not mine. I froze, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding in my ears. It was coming from the corner of the room. My phone was on the nightstand. Slowly, painstakingly, I turned